My name is Steve Schofield. All of these organizations are involved with assisting the Hmong, and especially Hmong veterans. The Hmong American Friendship Association, Incorporated, is a co-sponsor of this presentation. Our goal is to provide an overview of the secret war in Laos and the part the Hmong played in it. We hope the presentation is used to educate the Hmong youth and to edify the non-Hmong in the audience. The older Hmong know about the war firsthand. They survived, but tens of thousands of their people did not. In 1966, I joined the U.S. Army Special Forces and was trained as a medic. I served with the 1st Special Forces Group in Okinawa and in Vietnam with Special Operations Group. In 1968, as a sergeant with SOG, I first visited Laos and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. On that mission, a group of ethnic Chinese and Cambodians and 14 U.S. Special Forces soldiers were sent by helicopter 13 miles into Laos. We were there to do a reconnaissance in force. It turned out badly, with 2 U.S. Special Forces and several Chinese and Cambodians killed, and dozens of the 140-man company wounded. But that is another story. In 1969, I was recruited by the United States Agency for International Development to work in northern Laos as a public health advisor. I arrived in Laos in October 1969 and was among the last 26 Americans evacuated in May 1975. In 1969, I was only 24 years old, but was twice the age of many of the Hmong frontline soldiers. Laos is a landlocked country, surrounded by Thailand to the west and moving clockwise around the map, Burma, People's Republic of China, North and South Vietnam, and Cambodia. The Mekong River forms most of the western border with Thailand and Burma. The Annam Mountains form the eastern border with Vietnam. These rugged mountains provided the North Vietnamese Army with sanctuary and access around the DMZ, or Demilitarized Zone, to South Vietnam via the trail. If you drew a line from Hanoi to Vientiane, you would pass through Sam Nua and the Plain des Jars. This line would also bisect Military Region 2. The PDJ was a high plateau where the roads from North Vietnam to the Mekong intersected. Obviously, the PDJ was strategic because the roads gave the NBA access to Thailand. It would become one of the most heavily bombed areas in all of Southeast Asia. MR2 was also the traditional home of the Hmong in Laos. The Hmong were extremely independent, self-reliant people who resisted the advance of the NBA into Laos in the early 1950s. Initially, the Hmong fought the NBA with traditional weapons, the crossbow and homemade flintlock rifles. Laos was an ancient kingdom known as the Land of a Million Elephants. In 1969, Laos was a strategic political entity governed by a tripartite coalition established in 1962. Laos was a neutral state whose neutrality was overseen by ineffective UN International Control Commission. The Lao government was made up of the U.S.-supported royalist faction with a king and prime minister. The royal capital was in Luang Prabang to the northwest of Vientiane. Vientiane was the administrative capital. The Royal Lao government controlled the Mekong River Valley, most of Saiburi province, which was west of the Mekong, and the western lowlands. The neutralists with virtually no political power or territory were a non-entity by 1969. Their headquarters were in Vang Vieng. The Communist Patha Lao, controlled by the North Vietnamese, held the north and entire eastern half of the country. They had their headquarters in Sam Nua province. In the far northeast, the People's Republic of China was building a road into Laos. Vientiane in 1969 was almost surreal. It was a sleepy, dusty river town with little hint of the war raging up country. The only sign that something was amiss was the presence of so many foreigners, mostly Americans. There were 1,200 USAID employees in Laos, not to mention hundreds more from the embassy, United States Information Service, CIA, and military attachés. All the great powers had embassies with large contingents. Most of the Americans in Laos were civilians and knew little of the war. They helped in the development of Laos, building a dam, roads, fisheries, and model farms, and by training teachers and police. Many of the Americans who were directly involved in the war were based in Thailand. Others like me were based in the remote northern towns of Samtong and Longchang, Laos. The population of Laos in 1969 was approximately 3.5 million, the majority of whom were Lao, racially similar to the Thai, who are of Indo-Burmese origin. Most of the Lao inhabited the fertile Mekong River Valley. The Lao are Buddhist, a gentle, happy people who are not very warlike. The second largest population group in Laos were the Hmong. The Hmong, a mountain people, accounted for about 10% of the population. They, by Lao standards, were primitive. The Hmong are animists of Tibeto-Burmese origin, closer kin to mountain peoples such as Tibetans or Nepalese. They are hardworking and tough, traits required in order to farm the steep mountainsides. They have close family and clan ties and are honest and loyal. They were ideal recruits for the SF and CIA. In 1960, the CIA began supplying the Hmong with small arms. The CIA recruited, trained, fed, paid, and equipped the Hmong to fight the NBA. The Forces Army Royale, the regular army of Laos, did skirmish with the Pathet Lao. The CIA recruited Upland Lao, Lao Tung, and other tribal groups in the southeast to fight the NBA. Other tribal groups in the north also fought the NBA and forayed into North Vietnam and China. The Hmong bore the brunt of the fighting in Laos and suffered casualties of 20% of the entire male population. The Hmong were led by the only Hmong general in the FAR, or the Forces Army Royale, Major General Vang Pao. His headquarters was at Long Chien. The CIA-trained special guerrilla units attacked the NVA on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, forcing the NVA to commit as many as 20,000 to 30,000 troops to trail security. 3 first-rate combat divisions. These NVA troops would otherwise be fighting the Americans in South Vietnam. The Hmong also fought from remote, fortified positions, which were often attacked by the NVA. These bases could only be resupplied by air. For years, the NVA tried without success to overrun these positions at Buom Long, Lima Site 32. In 1969, Vang Pao's Hmong battalions even drove the heavily armed NVA off the strategic PDJ. The NVA retreated, leaving Soviet-built PT-76 tanks, armored cars fitted with 14.2 millimeter machine guns, and 82 millimeter artillery pieces. This at a time when the communist world continued to claim that the war in Laos was between the U.S. government and the oppressed nationalist Pathet Lao guerrillas. The U.S. Air Force flew close air support and strategic bombing missions in support of the Hmong. Many aircraft were lost in and around the PDJ, and as the slides show, the NVA as well as the Americans lost aircraft there. The first is a Soviet-built AN-2 Colt biplane, and the next is a U.S. C-123 cargo plane. The casualty rate among Americans in Laos was very low. The pilots incurred the highest casualties, with the majority shot down by the NVA radar-controlled anti-aircraft guns and surface-to-air missiles. Bad weather accidents also took a toll on both military and civilian pilots. Rescue teams of Hmong were at the ready to help in recovering those pilots who were shot down. It was part of my responsibilities to perform search and rescue of downed pilots, but often it was the Hmong troops on the ground who got to our pilots first. Vang Pao also had a U.S. Air Force-trained Hmong Air Force, flying converted T-28 trainers. The T-28s were fitted with rockets, bombs, and machine guns. These close air support fighter-bomber pilots are some of the best in all of Southeast Asia. Many logged thousands of hours of combat flight time before being killed. Few survived the war. As the war progressed, the Hmong were forced from their traditional mountaintop villages, fleeing before the advancing NBA. The population moved southwest to lower areas. In the lowlands, diseases such as malaria, dysentery were common. Because of their isolation, the Hmong had not required immunity to many common Western diseases. In 1970, an outbreak of measles killed hundreds of children. The infant mortality rate reached 70%. USAID provided health care for the Hmong with hospitals in Sam Tong and in its sister city, Long Chen, the secret CIA base. Long Chen was across the ridgeline to the south. The Sam Tong Hospital treated primarily sick and war-wounded civilians and military dependents, while the Long Chen Hospital treated primarily military casualties. Both hospitals had Lao and at least one American surgeon and nurse. The primary nursing staff was made up of young upland Lao and Hmong girls. By March 1970, the Sam Tong Hospital was treating the military casualties that were far too numerous for the Long Chen Hospital. On average, 120 to 140 military casualties were being treated in the hospital on any given day. The village health program consisted of 50 dispensaries, staffed by approximately 100 Hmong and Lao field nurses and medics. They were sent to the remote villages. These villages were often only accessible by air and surrounded by the NBA and PL troops. Food and medicine was delivered by air. Severely sick patients were transported to the hospitals and returned back to their villages. Rice, the staple diet, was airdropped. My official duty was to supervise the VHP, but my top secret responsibilities were to provide search and rescue for downed U.S. and Allied air crews, and to train, support, and supply military special guerrilla unit medics in the field. I visited all the dispensaries on a regular basis and saw firsthand the casualties of war. Not only casualties among the soldiers, but among the families of the soldiers who accompanied them to the outposts. These fortified bases were routinely mortared, rocketed, and at least one occasion strafed and bombed by the NBA. Sam Tong was the base for USAID operations in Military Region 2, and it was run by a crusty, retired Indiana farmer by the name of Edgar Pop Buell. He died in 1980 while on vacation from Thailand, where he was continuing to help the Hmong in the refugee camps. While Pop worked for the U.S. government, Father Luc Bouchard had a higher calling and did much to help the hill people of northern Laos. Father Luc now works in the mountains of Indonesia. Both were loved and respected by all that knew them. In late 1969, the last New Year's celebration was held in Sam Tong. It proved to be a welcome respite from the war being fought just to the north, on and around the PDJ. Following the traditional reception line for visiting dignitaries, the courting game of ball toss was played, and even a beauty contest was held. Security was deteriorating in Sam Tong, and we began building bunkers and trenches. I gave the medics in training some basic military training and put them on night guard. In March 1970, NVA sappers, followed by infantry, attacked Sam Tong. Teachers, police, and the few military left at Sam Tong fought a rearguard action. The hospital and most of Sam Tong were destroyed during the ensuing battle. 2 weeks later, T-28s were still bombing between Sam Tong and Long Chen. Because of good intelligence, we were aware of the impending attack and were able to evacuate all the hospital patients and many of the women and children in Sam Tong. The rest of the population fled south through the jungle. The air evacuation was to the Public Works Road Camp airstrip to the south of Long Chen. This camp was called Ban Son, and we soon had a new refugee relief center and hospital in operation. It became our base for the next 4 years. Sam Tong was abandoned. At one point, Ban Son was said to be the busiest airfield in the world. It would be hard to tell from this photo of a single H-34 taking off. The next 3 years were marked by retreat and regrouping. By 1972-73, the Hmong had been bled dry during the heaviest fighting of the war. Thai volunteer battalions were sent in to fight in northern Laos. These troops also sustained horrific casualties. During the 1973 dry season NBA offensive, every day we shipped one or more C-123 and C-130 loads of wounded Thai soldiers back to Udon in Thailand. Every day this went on during the entire 3 months offensive. Long Chen was almost overrun by an NBA tank attack. The tanks were firing down into the valley from the Skyline Ridge. Expertly flown B-52 airstrikes on the ridge above, the one-time second-largest city in Laos, saved the day. The bombs fell through the overcast and rain, and the NBA never knew what hit them. In 1973, a peace accord was signed, and for the most part, the fighting stopped. The Hmong were able to somewhat recover from the long years of fighting. USAID began real public health programs to include maternal child health, family planning, and malaria control. Some programs worked better than others. As you can see by this photo, the chief midwives are all pregnant. In May 1975, following the collapse of Vietnam and Cambodia, the NBA-led Pathet Lao took over the government of Laos without a fight. Major General Vang Pao and many of his staff were flown to safety. The rest of the Hmong were left to fend for themselves. The U.S. government abandoned their allies in Laos. I was and still am ashamed of what the U.S. government did to the Hmong. The Hmong were now targeted for genocide. Many were killed outright. Others were sent to Sam Nua province to be re-educated in forced labor camps and never seen again. Still others took the mountains and continued to fight. The NBA bombed and gassed them from the air. Many attempted the difficult journey to Thailand, moving at night with just the clothes on their backs. The lucky Hmong who made it to Thailand were put into refugee camps, and most of those who were former U.S. employees or their families were eventually settled in America. They had no place left to go. There has never been any immigrant group arriving on these shores that have suffered as the Hmong have. Suffered as a result of their service and loyalty to the U.S. government. I have had two objectives in mind when preparing this presentation. One is to publicize the role of the Hmong in the secret war so that they be recognized for their service to the U.S. and to be better understood and accepted into the melting pot of America. Laos was not, is not now, or ever will be the homeland of the Lao Hmong. America is their home. My second goal is to speak to the young Hmong people born or raised here. I want you to continue to learn of the history, proud traditions, and sacrifices of your elders. One traditional crop of the Hmong was opium. The Golden Triangle, which includes the traditional homeland of the Hmong, is well known by most as the source of much of the world's opium. The Hmong grew opium poppies as a cash crop, and some used opium as medicine, not as a means to get high. The old gentleman in the photo is an addict, but there were relatively few of them. Opium was used to treat pain and dysentery. I was involved in the first narcotics detoxification program in Laos, and soon learned the methods used in America really had no bearing with the Hmong addicts. The Hmong were physically, not psychologically addicted. Drug use is not a Hmong tradition. The Hmong in Laos were known for their fierce independence, ability to work very hard, loyalty, honesty, and courage. Today, the next generation in America has those high standards to live up to. Embrace your heritage, learn your culture, and help your elders to become citizens and to assimilate to the U.S. culture. Practice good citizenship. Get involved with your entire community, not just the Hmong community. You have tremendous opportunities and potential, which were denied the Hmong for generations in China and Laos. Drugs and gangs are a cop-out and a dead end. It hurts me to see one young life wasted because I saw the suffering and hardships the Hmong endured in Laos. It was a tragedy, but the end result was that you would benefit from living in America. You have the same opportunity and right to succeed as any other American. Please take full advantage of all that America has to offer. You saw this photo earlier. I took it in Samtong in 1969. It is a photo of a 9 or 10-year-old soldier. He was an orphan. He was small, even for a Hmong of his age, barely taller than the hood of a Jeep, and barely taller than the M16 he carried. His boots were several sizes too big. Even as early as 1969, with 4 more years of fighting ahead, boys of 10 were on the front line. For many years, I have often looked at that photo and wondered what happened to that boy. Did he survive? Just last year, I learned that not only did he survive, but he went on to become a lieutenant, and Nia Tong Lor is now the Lao Hmong American Coalition state representative for Wisconsin. This is a photo of us taken in 1997. Physically, he has not changed much, but like many thousands of Hmong, he has traveled hundreds of years and a world away from the life of a 10-year-old soldier in the isolated mountains of Laos. If you would like to learn more about the Hmong and the Secret War, these books are highly recommended. Thank you.
The Lao Hmong and American Veterans Memorial Committee has been formed to build a memorial on the Sheboygan Lakefront to honor the living and the dead Lao, Hmong, and Americans who fought in the Secret War in Laos from 1960 to 1975. The city of Sheboygan has donated the land, the committee has developed the plans, and they have begun to raise funds to build the memorial. The memorial is to be constructed of 4-foot-high black granite walls forming a circle. The outside of the wall will be decorated with traditional designs, some of which will be submitted by local students. The inside of the walls will list the names of the Lao, Hmong, and American military and civilians who fought the Secret War and tell their stories, describing how the Lao and the Hmong sacrificed in an effort to keep their homeland free. The memorial is designed not only to honor veterans, but to educate as well. You can participate in this project by financially supporting the construction of the memorial and by registering names of veterans to be listed on the memorial. For more information, please visit the Lao, Hmong, and American Veterans Memorial website at www.laohmongus.memorial.org.